Back when Skylanders games still came out, we would get figures and games with each new release. This led to the sort of lifespan of each game being spread out by releasing figures in waves throughout the game's life. This led to certain Skylanders obviously releasing in certain waves, and the later wave Skylanders becoming a lot more rare, and the earlier wave Skylanders obviously being a lot more common. In this video, we're going to be going over all the waves for each Skylanders game and the order that they came out in, and for the most part, all the details about them. Something that I do want to note is that the information on the Spyro's Adventure and Giants waves is a lot more limited, and it's very difficult to actually find set in stone release dates for each of those waves. So some of the data might be a little bit off, or it's just not included at all if I don't feel like what I would be offering is reliable information. Also, a few things I do want to mention as far as what I will be including is for each of the waves is it's mainly going to be the figures and the first available time you can play as the figures. So I will not be including any kind of reposes, variants, eons, elites, traps, creation crystals, vehicles, magic items, adventure pack pieces, imaginary chests, or anything else of that sort. Also, it doesn't matter if it's a light core, a variant, a triple pack, adventure pack, or in the starter pack, a Skylander will be counted as being released in the first wave they got a playable figure in. So if Igniter didn't get his own single pack until wave 5, but he was released in the 3DS starter pack in wave 1, he will be counted as a wave 1 Skylander. Also, this is based on US release timing, so it may vary slightly across the globe, but since Skylanders was mainly in the US, that's mainly where it's definitely the biggest. This is what I'm going to be going off of, also because there's the most reliable information as far as release timing in the US goes. Also, some waves released early in certain stores, typically Toys R Us, so if this is the case, the release date will be counted as when they first came out at the store that had them the earliest. So I will be saying the early, if Toys R Us got them a week early, I will be counting that as the official release date when they released in Toys R Us, obviously. There are some weird exceptions to all these rules, and of course some Skylanders, we still don't even know really when they released, so I'm going to go over all that later in the video. Some basic knowledge on release waves before we begin with each game. Basically, normally release wave 1 would have the starter packs, of course, and a bunch of the Skylanders. This would usually be the largest release wave, and it would have a bunch of new gimmick landers and a bunch of new cores. Wave 2, 3, and 4 would all be, I would say, either less than half or just about half of what wave 1 offered. Normally not more than half, so these would be much smaller in comparison. And then wave 5 would generally have like 1 to 3 Skylanders at most. It would not have much to offer. Now, starting with Spyro's Adventure, as this was the first game, there really wasn't any formula for them to go off of. They had nothing to build on top of or to advance. They were really free to do whatever they want, and this ended up with some pretty interesting waves. I will say that the release dates, as this was so long ago, not many people were keeping track of them, so not many people actually knew the set in stone release date for each of these, so I'm not going to be including them because I don't want to spread misinformation about when these were released, as I really found it difficult while doing research for this video to find when these figures were actually released. But Wave 1 for Spyro's Adventure had Bash, Spyro, Gilgrunt, Trigger Happy, Igniter, Stealth Elf, Boomer, Ghost Roaster, Terrafin, Drobot, Flame Slinger, Stump Smash, Eruptor, Chop Chop, Drill Sergeant, Whirlwind, Zap, Prism Break, Sonic Boom, and Voodoo. Obviously, there's a huge spread of Skylanders here. If you're picking this game up day one with all the figures, you're going to have loads of figures to play. Even if you're not going to get all the figures and you just want to get maybe the starter pack and one more, you're going to have tons of options between close range, and long range. This wave was definitely done very well, but a lot of that was due to it just being a massive quantity of Skylanders. And of course, since, as I say, a lot of the Skylanders are quality Skylanders that everyone likes. So I think Wave 1 was done pretty dang good, and for this game, they kind of spread it even, as the first wave had just a ton of Skylanders, and every other wave only had 3 new Skylanders. So Wave 2 had Wrecking Ball, Hex, and Dino-Rang. Obviously, this isn't as crazy. I've never really been a huge fan of Hex, and of course, I know that a huge sum of the community does not like Wrecking Ball at all, but Dino-Rang is actually pretty cool. Dino-Rang is a unique Skylander. I mean, he's a dinosaur, throws boomerangs. How can you not really like this guy? He's really fun. So Wave 2, I think, was a kind of what I come to expect from Wave 2s. Wave 2s normally are not that good. They're normally like had the least amount of Skylanders, and the Skylanders, I would say the average of them, it normally is not that good compared to the other waves. Now, Wave 3, we had Slam Bam, Cinder, and Double Trouble. I think this is probably an improvement. I really like Slam Bam, and I like Cinder. I know Cinder's the most popular Skylander, but I like both those two, and I've never played as Double Trouble, but this wave, I think, is just a little bit better than Wave 2. Now, Wave 4, this one is probably a lot of people's favorite, or at least from the waves that only have 3 Skylanders, and that is Sunburn, Lightning Rod, and Zook. Sunburn, I do not have, but I know Sunburn is kind of a fan favorite, and of course he's forgotten or whatever, which kind of makes sense as he was a late wave Skylander. It's a lot easier for a Skylander to be forgotten when they're released in a later wave. And then we had Lightning Rod and Zook, which both of those Skylanders I really like. I think they have cool designs, they're fun to play as, etc. So I think this wave was actually pretty good for a late wave, and I think a lot of people definitely appreciated what came out in it. And then wave 5 had Camo, Whamshell, and Warnado. This one for me, I think Camo like hard carries it. Camo is really good. These three Skylanders all have amazing designs in my opinion, but Warnado's moveset I just do not think lives up to the hype. And Whamshell's good. I don't have any problem with Whamshell, but I feel like they could have put him in wave 1 and it wouldn't have made that big of a difference, honestly. So I think the final wave was pretty good, but there weren't any really standout waves here. They were all kind of good. I think wave 4 might have been the best of the all the waves after wave 1. Of course, wave 1 had the most overall, so wave 1 I think definitely takes the cake for Spyro's Adventure, but those are the release waves for SSA. And now let's move on to Giants. Now we move on to Giants. This might be the game that there's the least information for. Also, there's the least amount of Skylanders, so it was kind of difficult to like make these set release dates when there's only 16 new Skylanders. So it's kind of interesting, but I'm pretty sure I was able to sort of figure out when they were all released at, although some information may be slightly inaccurate, slightly off, but I really don't think so. So wave 1 was Tree Rex, obviously, Swarm, Bouncer, Crusher, Fright Rider, Chill, Pop Fizz, and Jetvac. Obviously, there's a solid group of Giants and a solid group of cores. So you got 4 new Giants, 4 new cores. Obviously, I'm not the craziest about Chill, and I'm not the craziest about Bouncer. But between Tree Rex, Swarm, and Crusher, and then having Pop Fizz and Jetvac, I mean, you got some solid cores here. And Fright Rider definitely brings something new to the table. He is the type of Skylander we would never have seen in SSA. A design like that is very new and definitely very unique. So it was really cool to see something like that very early in Wave 1. So this Wave 1 is definitely solid. What you come to expect from a Wave 1, having about like half the Skylanders for the entire game. Now looking at Wave 2, this one's definitely a lot smaller, but I think it's still pretty good. We got Hothead, Flashwing, Sprocket, and Shroom Boom. 3 new cores, which is pretty interesting. I feel like having 1 giant, 3 new cores is kind of crazy, but the 1 giant is actually really good, and the 3 cores, Sprocket, of course, people don't really like Sprocket that much, but Shroom Boom and Flashwing I actually really like. Me personally, I like Shroom Boom a little bit more than Flashwing, but Flashwing's still great. And then Hothead, of course. Hothead's my boy. It was my first Skylander ever, so gotta love Hothead. Wave 2, I think, was actually definitely a solid one, and it had one sort of forgotten, and not really liked or well-perceived Skylander, and that is Sprocket, so I guess I can understand that when looking at Wave 2. It normally has at least 1 or 2 Skylanders that are not very appreciated. Now looking at Wave 3, I'm pretty sure the only new Skylander they released was Hothead, and this was in a triple pack. Once again, this is kind of due to Giants being this game that had a limited new roster, and a lot of the new Skylanders I think came out in this wave were reposes and light cores and stuff like that. So the actual only new Skylander was Hot Dog in this triple pack that you could play as. Obviously, Hot Dog, he's great, he's fine, but only having 1 new Skylander, like, come on, dude. I don't know how happy people were really gonna be with just reposes and light cores. So having Hot Dog here was kind of interesting, and I don't think he got his own single pack until later on. Now Wave 4 was Thumpback and Eyebrow. 2 giants. It kind of gets weird, like the spread, as it's like 1 core then 2 giants. Like, it's very interesting, but Thumpback and Eyebrow I think that was a solid wave. Those are some 2 really cool giants right there. So getting those giants in their own wave, like by the time the game's hype is sort of dying down, is actually really cool, and those giants are definitely fun to use. So Wave 4 I think actually did pretty dang good. Now Wave 5, the only one released was Ninjini. Normally, like the Wave 5 Skylander, if it's only 1 Skylander, it's gonna be like really good, the most hyped, the most coolest looking Skylander from all the poster, whatever, is going to be Wave 5. Ninjini, personally, I always thought she looked really cool, and she actually is decent, but of course she isn't that well perceived, and a lot of people think she is actually the worst giant. But Ninjini, I would say, as a Wave 5, it actually isn't that bad. I've started to come around to her more, and as a Wave 5, I think she has that cool design, and she was definitely sort of more of obscure, like, she was kind of like obscured during the release, and wasn't really talked about much until later on, when she obviously was released, and, like, I guess fans, the perception wasn't really there, but nowadays, I kind of like her. So that's the release waves for Giants. Of course, it was pretty typical, but it was kind of weird since it had such a small roster, but I still think it worked in the end. Now moving on to Swap Force, this is where it sort of gets more typical as far as how the waves spread across the normal games, and this is going to be wave 1 just being absolutely massive and then them getting sort of smaller as they go on, but the Skylanders getting cooler and more desired as they go on. Like, I remember looking at the poster and like the few Skylanders that I really wanted were like all, you know, wave 3, 4, and 5, so this one's pretty interesting. But starting off with wave 1, this is where I officially was able to find set in stone release dates that I'm fairly, like, really confident in. Wave 1, which was October 13th, 2013, the release date for the game. Blast Zone, Washbuckler, my bad. Free Ranger, Magna Charge, Rattleshake, Hoot Loop, Countdown, Roller Brawl, Slobbertooth, Zulu, Grim Creeper, Smolder Dash, Star Strike, Pop Thorn, and Bumble Blast. This was a solid wave filled with a lot of new Skylanders that I think a lot of people are really going to like. I remember the swappers, even outside the starter pack, you got Free Ranger, Magna Charge, Rattleshake. I mean, you can have a ton of fun with those guys, and the cores are some pretty dang good ones. I mean, between Countdown, Grim Creeper, Smolder Dash, Bumble Blast, and a lot of these, as I said at the beginning of the video, a lot of these are going to be either variants or light cores. Like a lot of, I think it was Grim Creeper and Smolder Dash, it was only their light core released in wave 1, but of course it's the same Skylander and you were first able to play as them in wave 1, so I'm counting them as wave 1 Skylanders. That's just how I'm doing it. But yeah, Smolder Dash definitely is really good, and same with Bumble Blast and Pop Thorn and a lot of these other ones released in wave 1, so I think wave 1 for Swap was really knocked it out of the park. And then wave 2 was released October 27th, 2013, so 2 weeks later, or is that 2 weeks later? No, it's only 1 week later, my bad. But it is honestly pretty good for a wave 2. It has Boomjet, Firecracking, Gorilla Drillet, Night Shift, Riptide, and Scorp. The 2 cores are definitely good. I know a lot of people don't really like Riptide that much, but personally I do. And Scorp as well. I think Scorp is a fairly beloved core. I personally really like Scorp. And then Boomjet and Night Shift at least are some really good cores. Firecracking, Gorilla Drillet I'm a little bit more iffy on, but it's not too bad overall. It's kind of what I expect from wave 2, but I would say a little bit above average. Now looking at wave 3, this is one that I was very hyped for, and this released between December 22nd and December 29th, depending on the store and the region. But this is Rubble Rouser, Spire Eyes, Stink Bomb, Dune Bug, and Wind Up. Now, Rubble Rouser and Spire Eyes I absolutely love. Stink Bomb I absolutely love his design. So I remember walking into Toys R Us and seeing these guys for the first time, and I went crazy because I wanted them so bad. I remember getting Spire Eyes and Stink Bomb, and I don't think I got Rubble Rouser because he doesn't have it nearly as enticing of a design. But this wave was awesome to finally see. Dune Bug, I don't know if he ever really lived up to the hype. I don't know how much hype there was, but I'm not too crazy about Dune Bug, and I personally never had Wind Up. But the swappers I think were absolutely amazing for this wave, and there's definitely some hype for these guys back in the day. Now wave 4, this might have been the most hyped wave. Freeze Blade, Trap Shadow, Frino, Scratch, and Punk Shock. Of course, this probably explains why Scratch is so rare, and Freeze Blade and Trap Shadow just had such cool designs. I wanted Freeze Blade so bad from the beginning, and once I finally played as him, it was amazing, dude. I remember the hype for Freeze Blade being absolutely unreal, and so he was a perfect late wave Skylander for me. Trap Shadow did have a really cool design too, but unfortunately, I never really enjoyed playing as him that much. I thought his moveset just wasn't for me. And then Frino was decent, and Scratch and Punk Shock I never got, and of course, they are some more like, they're definitely on the rare side. And this wave released in March 6th, so there was like a 3-month gap almost. I'm not totally sure if I mentioned that, but yeah, nothing in January or February until we got these guys in March 6th. And then finally wave 5 in May 13th, we finally got Doomstone. The one Skylander, the last Skylander released for Swap Force was Doomstone. Of course, this explains why he is about, you know, $15 more expensive than every other swapper, like even like $15 to $20 more expensive than like every other swapper. Most swappers are like $10. This guy is like 30. So Doomstone, I mean, if you play as him, I do not think he disappoints. I absolutely love Doomstone, but he was the one that I actually was not able to get back in the day, and I only got him recently when I got back into Skylanders. But overall, I think the release cycle for this game was pretty good, and it did pretty good as far as what I expect from Skylanders. And of course, Doomstone being like a super late wave was kind of expected. When you look at the poster nowadays, I think he's one of the ones with the coolest design, but I think it worked pretty well. So moving on to the next game in the series, which is going to be Trap Team. Trap Team did release waves, I would say fairly well, but at the same time, this game has a lot of really rare Skylanders that is due to them being released in weight waves and sort of forgotten about, and we were already focused on supercharged by the time they came out, which is kind of goofy for them to be super rare because of that, but it's pretty standard for this kind of series, I would say. So the Wave 1 released October 15, 2014. Obviously, we got Wildfire, Crypt King, Gusto, Jawbreaker, Snapshot, Wall Up, Gear Shift, Blades, Chopper, Food Fight, Funny Bone, and Torch. A lot of people think that Gear Shift actually isn't a Wave 1 Skylander, but every source on the internet I could find said that she is a Wave 1 Skylander, and I remember her being out pretty early with like all the other Trapmasters, although I don't know if she was like delayed or something, but a lot of people just seem to think that Gear Shift wasn't actually Wave 1, but she was. And of course, these Trapmasters are absolutely amazing. I think we got some of the best ever here, between Wildfire, Crypt King, Gusto, and Snapshot especially, and Gear Shift is amazing. I mean, this has my top 4 Trapmasters. All 4 of them are here in this wave, and there's only 7 of them. And then of course the other ones I also really like too. And the cores I think were great too. I mean, Blades, Torch, Chopper, Food Fight, and Funny Bone. I have all of those guys, and they're all great to play as. The Trap Team cores are very slept on, but they're really fun. This is a solid Wave 1. If you went out and bought the whole Wave 1, you would have just fun for hours playing through the game and leveling up all these new Skylanders, so they definitely hit it out the park with this Wave 1. Now, Wave 2 was 1 week later, October 12th, 2014, we got Bushwhack, Head Rush, Lobstar, Fist Bump, Shredhead, and Deja Vu. This is when I think Wave 2 started being like kind of disappointing. Like Bushwhack, Head Rush, and Lobstar I just do not think lived up to that first wave of Trapmasters. Bushwhack is great, but I feel like he kind of offers the same thing as Crypt King and Wildfire, just not as well. But I do still definitely love Bushwhack. I absolutely love playing as him. And then Lobstar, I feel like he's just a worse ranged water Trapmaster than Snapshot. And then Head Rush, obviously you guys know the deal with Head Rush. I just feel like the Trapmasters were not as good here. Then the cores, I don't think were bad though. I don't have Shredhead, but I've only heard good things about him. Fist Bump I have, and I absolutely love Fist Bump. I'm glad he seems like a Wave 2 Scout though. And then Deja Vu, I do have Deja Vu, and of course that's the Mirror Mystery Adventure Pack. But Deja Vu is pretty fun, but she is kind of weird to play as, and it's kind of spammy, so I'm not totally sure how much people really appreciated this wave. I thought it was kind of mixed. Like it might be one of the worst waves ever released, but of course as a Skylanders wave it's still gonna have some hidden gems in there between Fist Bump and Bushwhack, so it wasn't all bad. Now moving on to Wave 3, this one's interesting. This one is quite a bit larger than Wave 2, and that is due to the light and dark elements coming out in Wave 3, and this was released December 21st, 2014. This is gonna have Blaster Mine, Kaboom, Tough Luck, Nightlight, Nightmare, Batspin, Cobra Kadabra, High Five, and Trailblazer. Now, from those first 3 Trapmasters, this sounds absolutely horrible. If they didn't have the light and dark element, this would have been like my least favorite wave ever. Between Blastermind, Kaboom, and Tough Luck, those are quite literally my 3 least favorite Trapmasters. Nightlight, I'm not the biggest fan of either. Nightmare kind of saved the Trapmasters in this wave for me. Nightmare I do really like, and I can really appreciate Nightmare being in there. And then of course they had Batspin, Cobra Kadabra, High Five, and Trailblazer. Some of the more forgotten cores for sure. I got High Five. High Five is pretty cool. I also do like Trailblazer. Batspin and Cobra Kadabra are on the more expensive side, and I do not have those, but I haven't really heard too much negativity about them. For the most part, I think people like those cores. And of course, this is where getting to this wave is when the Scounders start to get more on the expensive side, and they're much rarer nowadays. Now looking at Wave 4, was released in March 19th, 2015, so of course a lot of the hype is already starting to move over to the game that's coming out in that year, being Superchargers. This wave is going to have Shortcut, Thunderbolt, Blackout, Spotlight, Rocky Roll, and Echo. Now I'm pretty sure every one of these Skylanders nowadays is at least a little bit more expensive than what they went for back in the day. Shortcut and Thunderbolt aren't too crazy, but the cores are definitely pretty outrageous. But looking at these Trapmasters, I think they're really good. Shortcut and Thunderbolt I both think are really solid Scounders that definitely had enticing designs. I feel like they are late wave Scounders. As I see them, I get excited and I want to play as them. And then looking at the cores, Blackout, Spotlight, Rocky Roll, and Echo are all very rare nowadays. I only have one of them, the one that doesn't go for like $100. I have Rocky Roll, which is pretty cool. He's still like 30 to 40, but then Blackout, Spotlight, Echo are all like in the 70 to 100 range. You can really find them for anything around there. I can't really speak on these guys, but I will say they have really cool designs, but they did turn out extremely rare, so I do not have them. And then the last wave, which was May 1st for the Trapmasters and May 15th for the cores, is going to be Enigma, and Fling Kong, and then Flipwreck as well. So Enigma, obviously being the last Trap Master, kind of makes sense. He definitely has the most mysterious and like probably hyped up design of all the Trap Masters. And then Fling Kong and Flipwreck were, I would say, two very forgotten cores from Trap Team, which makes sense as they released Wave 5. And so you look at Fling Kong, who I would say is the most forgotten Skylander ever. It kind of makes sense as he was released in May of 2015, and this game came out in October of 2014, which is just kind of insane. But Fling Kong and Flipwreck, I do not have either of them, so I can't really speak on them, but I will say Enigma's great. This is kind of what I expect from a Wave 5. It has, you know, just a few more Skylanders thrown in there, but I would say the Skylanders are pretty decent overall. I haven't heard too much negativity about Fling Kong or Flipwreck, and I know that Enigma is great from personal experience. Now, looking at Superchargers, this game also has a lack of information regarding actual dates that each wave was released on. I'm assuming it has something to do with this game sort of being the decline of Skylanders, and this also being sort of when certain Skylanders were limited release across different regions, so it kind of makes sense. But Wave 1 was obviously release day, that one isn't too crazy. But this is going to be Turbocharged Donkey Kong, Super Shot Stealth Elf, Hammer Slam Bowser, Spitfire, Deep Dive Gilgrunt, Dive Clops, Fiesta, Hurricane Jetpack, Sharkshooter Terrafin, and Stormblade. This had good Skylanders, especially if you're on Nintendo and you're willing to buy the Racing Starter Pack and the normal Starter Pack so you can get Bowser. And then if you get just some of these other Skylanders, I think you could have a really good time playing through the game with just the ones in this wave. But I think there still are a lot of like good Skylanders that you could have put in Wave 1. Like, I feel like this is missing some Skylanders that would have made it better. And at the same time, a lot of these like reposes having them in Wave 1, I feel like you could have saved them for later and actually built up hype for them rather than continuing to release old Skylanders, although Superchargers did do it a lot better. Now, looking at Wave 2, this has High Volt, Nightfall, and Smash Hit. High Volt absolutely hit it out the park. I love High Volt. Nightfall is extremely confusing to play as, and I don't really like Nightfall. And she definitely could have passed off as a like Wave 5 Skylander with how cool of a design she has, but she doesn't, and so she's in Wave 2, which is kind of cool, I guess. And then Smash Hit. I do not have Smash Hit, but I haven't really heard anything negative about him. I've only really heard good things, and I think Smash Hit's pretty decent. Now, looking at Wave 3, we have Astro Blast, Big Bubble Pop Fizz, Lava Lance Eruptor, and Splat. This wave is, I would say, pretty good overall. Lava Lance Eruptor is a big improvement over the original Eruptor. Big Bubble Pop Fizz is not as good as the original Pop Fizz, but I don't think he's much worse. I still think he's actually pretty fun and has sort of the same gimmicks, which I like. And then Splat is, I would say, pretty good. The only really weak part of this wave for me is Astro Blast. I'm not too crazy about Astro Blast. I definitely like close range Skylanders more, and ones that can do big hit like attacks that do a lot of damage, so I think Splat was nice to have in this wave. And then Big Bubble Pop Fizz, of course, and Eruptor, they were pretty good. This wave overall was kind of weird that Wave 3 was bigger than Wave 2, but I guess it's whatever, it doesn't really matter. At this point in the series, they're kind of doing all sorts of crazy things with these waves. And then looking at Wave 4, we only got two Skylanders, which is Bone Bash Rollerball and Double Dare Trigger Happy. This wave I actually really like, especially by the designs of the figures. I mean, Bone Bash Rollerball and Double Dare Trigger Happy are really cool Skylanders. Bone Bash Rollerball is one of my favorite ones ever, so she definitely lived up to the Wave 4 hype that she got. And the Double Dare Trigger Happy, of course, this kind of probably explains him being on the rare side. I think he had limited release over here in the United States. I'm not totally sure, though. And then looking at Wave 5, of course, the only Skylander, probably the coolest looking one from the poster, is Thrillipede. But his release is very questionable as far as in the US. People don't really know if he released, if ever. I think he released like slightly in some stores, but it was a very like extremely rare occurrence. But I am pretty sure he released over in Europe and possibly Australia and other parts of the world. Not totally sure though, but I think part of the reason he's so expensive nowadays is because his release was very restricted, if not just like not even, if it didn't even happen at all. Like, I'm not totally sure what happened with Thrillipede, but of course everyone knows that he's super rare, and that is due to him being Wave 5 and having a horrible release. Now, looking at Imaginator's releases, this one is actually really cool to look at. I'm sure a lot of you guys are excited for this one. I'm excited for this one. This game was interesting, as I do have the official dates for all these releases. Now, Wave 1 was, of course, when the game came out, October 16th, 2016. We had Ambush, Barbella, Chopscotch, Kingpin, Golden Queen, Wolfgang, Dr. Crankcase, Taekwon Crow, Tri-Tip, Mysticat, Chompy Mage, Crash Bandicoot, Neocortex, and we had Chaos. This is a solid wave 1, dude. Like, a lot of these Skylanders are really good. Given that a lot of them are kind of difficult to get, of course, Chompy Mage, he's infamous for only being in that Amazon, like, 5 villain pack. They had to spend, like, $80 or $100 or something to get. So, Chompy Mage, as cool as he was kind of difficult to get in this wave. And it's really weird to see a wave 1 Skylander become an extremely rare release. But that is what happened with Chompy Mage. And I believe Chaos was only released in this wave if you pre-ordered, like, the Dark Edition starter pack or something like that. I'm not totally sure on that though, but Chaos was in this wave too, and of course Crash Bandicoot and Neo Cortex through the PlayStation starter pack were available. And then you got a bunch of the really good senseis, I would say, between Taiko and Crow, Wolfgang, and Dr. Crankcase. You got some really good villains in this wave, and then Tri-Tip, Golden Queen, Chopscotch. You got some really good senseis too. I would say this wave, if you only use counters in this wave, I feel like you still have a great experience. Now, this is where Magic is kind of weird, because although they were two separate waves, Wave 1 and Wave 2 both came out on release day. So it's like, are they really separate waves or not? I'm not sure. But Wave 2 had Aurora, Ember, Hoodsicle, and Starcast. This wave, I would say, is also really good. I like Ember, I like Starcast. Hoodsicle and Aurora I'm a little bit iffy on, but if you release them on the same day as Wave 1, like, that is a solid, gigantic release wave to come out with the game. And of course, Starcast I absolutely love, same with Ember, so you can have a great playthrough with just Skylanders from Wave 1 and Wave 2. And then later on, Wave 3 was sort of, this is kind of like the Wave 2 and 3 combined, because there wasn't really anything from Wave 2, like, we didn't really get anything new from release day until all the way in December 2nd of 2016. And that's going to be Boom Bloom, Flare Wolf, Pit Boss, Bad Juju, Buckshot, Chain Reaction, and Pinata. And wow, there are some cool Skylanders in here. Some disappointing ones, I will say, but there are some really cool really cool releases in here. I mean, between Flare Wolf, Chain Reaction, Pinata, Pit Boss, that is insane. Boom Bloom is also really good. Of course, you got that adventure pack with her. Bad Juju and Buckshot, I'm a little bit more iffy on. I'm not totally sure if they're like my favorites ever, but Bad Juju, I at least really like her design. Same with Buckshot, so it was really cool getting this release wave, and I think it did really good. Now, looking at Wave 4, this is kind of spread. It's only 2 Skylanders, and their releases are on completely different dates. First off, Grave Clubber was released February 27th of 2017. So this guy, I mean, obviously this is already like multiple, like 4 months or something after the release of the game, more than 4 months. We got Grave Clubber finally. Then April 7th of 2017, Wildstorm and the Cursed Tiki Temple were released. So this is weird. Why does this count as Wave 4? I'm not sure, but this is released in April, which is very, very late. I mean, not the latest we've ever seen it. We've seen Wave 5 Skylanders in May before, but Wildstorm, that definitely explains part of the reason why he was so rare. And of course, he'd never had his own single pack. The only way you could get him was in that Cursed Tiki Temple Adventure Pack. And then Wave 5 with completely unknown release dates, because they were released so late and some stores just did not even want to put them out at all or restock them ever. This has Blastertron, Robo, and Tidepool. An absolutely awesome release wave. Like, this has some amazing Skylanders. I think all these are at least above average, and of course Robo and Blastertron, just freaking awesome, dude. But no one really knows. Robo, I think, was released so late that it was almost like a year after the game had come out that he finally released. And he was already like expensive and hard to get. Like, even on Amazon, I'm pretty sure he was like $50 to $70 if you wanted to pick him up. So these Skylanders releases were all messed up, and it was just because the games were already dying at this point. They were already moving on, so it was just all messed up. But there is no set in stone release date for these 3. It probably was different. Like, I'm pretty sure Tidepool and Blastertron, I'm sure they came out on the same day, and then Robo came out over 2 months later. So if Tidepool and Blastertron came out in May or June, Robo we probably could have expected in like July or August, which is absolutely crazy. That should never be happening, but I guess that's just Imaginators for you. Alright, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys did enjoy. It was really fun to make it, and really fun to talk about these waves. No one has really ever talked about it, at least in the modern day Skylanders community, so I thought it was my chance to make a video about it. I thought it'd be really cool to talk about each of these release waves and sort of what I liked about them, what I didn't, and why some Skylanders are super rare. So if you like the video, please feel free to leave a like, subscribe if you like Skylanders content, as I obviously consistently make Skylanders content in 2024 for you guys, so it's pretty sick. And thank you guys for watching. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye bye, everybody.